They say you never truly know the limits of your own heart until you're forced to face them. For me, that moment came on a quiet summer weekend. The kind of weekend that seemed designed to let the world slow down just for a moment. It was supposed to be simple, a trip to my family's old lake house. A place filled with memories of laughter and warmth. My husband, Richard, couldn't make it. He was always tied up with work. And I'd long stopped hoping for a different answer, but I told myself it didn't matter. It would be just me and my stepson, Alex. Richard's absence had become routine. He was a provider, always ensuring our needs were met, but never seeing beyond the surface of what those needs truly were. His love had become distant, a formality rather than a connection. Alex, on the other hand, had always been present in his own quiet way. A teenager caught between the world of childhood and adulthood, searching for his place in a family that often felt incomplete. As I packed the car, I caught Alex glancing at me through the window. He offered to help, his tone casual, but something in his eyes lingered longer than it should have. I shook off the thought, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. We loaded the bags, and with one last glance at the empty house, we set off toward the lake. The drive to the lake was quiet at first, filled only with the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the occasional song from the radio. Alex sat in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the scenery rushing past. I tried to spark some small talk, asking him about his summer plans, his friends, or what he was looking forward to once school started again. His answers were polite, but brief, as though he was holding something back. As we neared the lake house, the air seemed to change. The soft scent of pine trees mixed with the cool breeze from the water, bringing back a flood of memories. It had been years since I'd last been here. The wooden dock, the creaking porch swing, the warm glow of the setting sun reflecting off the water. It all felt the same, yet different. Time had passed, and so had parts of me. We unpacked the car in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The lake house was modest, but comfortable, with creaky wooden floors and a cozy living room that overlooked the water. I set about dusting off furniture and opening windows, letting the crisp lake air flow through the house. Alex wandered to the dock, standing at the edge, as if he were trying to absorb the peace of the place. By the time dinner rolled around, the tension had started to ease. We cooked together in the small kitchen, laughing over clumsy spills and burnt edges of bread. For the first time in a while, I felt a sense of normalcy, like we were a real family, even if only for a fleeting moment. After dinner, Alex suggested we build a fire by the shore. I agreed, happy to prolong the sense of connection. As the flames crackled and sent embers into the star-filled sky, we sat in 2 weathered chairs, wrapped in blankets. He spoke more freely now, sharing stories about his friends and the classes he was dreading in the fall. "You've always been a good listener," he said at one point, his voice soft. "Dad doesn't really talk like this. He's different." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Richard's absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. I didn't know when I'd stopped expecting him to fill that gap. But I realized now how much I'd relied on Alex's quiet companionship to bridge it. As the night grew colder, I reached for the blanket to wrap it tighter around me. Alex noticed and offered his own without hesitation. His gesture was innocent, yet the way his hand brushed mine as he handed it over lingered for just a second too long. I froze, caught between gratitude and an inexplicable discomfort. I quickly thanked him, brushing the moment aside. The following day, The weather turned. Thick gray clouds rolled in, and soon the rain began to pour. Stuck inside, we spent the day playing board games, flipping through old photo albums, and talking about everything and nothing. It felt natural, even easy, until an unexpected storm knocked the power out. The house grew dark, the only light coming from the flickering candles we'd lit. I grabbed a few blankets and suggested we camp out in the living room, near the fireplace. As I stoked the fire, Alex returned with a bottle of wine he'd found in the pantry. "For the atmosphere," he joked. I hesitated, but eventually poured myself a glass. The warmth of the fire mixed with the wine, creating a cozy haze. We talked about old memories of the lake house, our favorite moments, and the people we missed. At some point, the conversation shifted. "You've always been more than a stepmom," Alex said, his voice quieter now. "You've been the one constant, the one person who always cared." His words hit me harder than I expected. I smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "That's my job, Alex." He shook his head. "No, it's more than that. You've done so much, more than he ever has." There it was, that unspoken truth we'd both been avoiding. The gap Richard had left in both our lives wasn't just something we'd learned to live with. It was something we'd built around. And in doing so, we'd created a bond that blurred the lines of what was appropriate, even if neither of us had intended it. As the fire crackled, I found myself lost in thought. The way Alex looked at me now was different. His gaze filled with something I couldn't, or didn't want to, name. I stood up, brushing off the feeling and heading to the kitchen to refill my glass. Alex followed, his presence close behind. "You're different here," he said suddenly, leaning against the counter. "You seem happier." I laughed nervously. "I guess this place just has that effect. It's peaceful." "It's not just the place," he replied. "It's us. It feels like it's just us." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I turned to face him, searching for the right thing to say, but nothing came. The tension between us was palpable, a current that neither of us knew how to break. "Alex," I began, but the rest of my sentence disappeared into the space between us. The tension between us was thick, the kind of silence that carried more weight than words ever could. I turned away from Alex, pretending to busy myself with something in the kitchen. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the glasses on the counter. I couldn't quite place the feeling. It was a strange mix of warmth, guilt, and confusion. "Alex, we should get some rest," I finally said, breaking the silence. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Wait," he said softly. His tone wasn't commanding, but there was something in it that made me pause. I turned back toward him, and in the dim light of the candlelit kitchen, his expression was hard to read. Vulnerable, conflicted, and searching. "I just need to say something," he continued. "You've been everything to me. Not just a stepmom. You've been the only person who's made me feel seen, like I matter." His words hit me with an intensity I wasn't prepared for. I wanted to respond, to say something reassuring, but the look in his eyes froze me. He stepped closer, cautiously, as if afraid I might pull away. "Alex," I whispered, my voice barely audible. My instinct told me to stop this, to put distance between us, but my feet stayed planted. "You don't have to say anything," he said. I want you to know what you mean to me." The space between us disappeared as he stepped even closer. I could feel the warmth of his presence, the faint smell of the rain-soaked air clinging to his shirt, His hand moved hesitantly, brushing against mine for just a moment before retreating. The gesture was small, but it sent a wave of conflicting emotions through me. The part of me that knew this was wrong screamed for me to pull back, to draw a line in the sand. But there was another part of me, a quieter, more vulnerable part, that yearned for the connection I hadn't felt in so long. "We can't," I began, my voice shaking. But even as I spoke the words, I knew they lacked conviction. "I know," Alex replied, his voice equally shaky. "I'm not trying to make this complicated. I wanted you to know how I feel." The honesty in his voice cut through the storm of emotions swirling inside me. For a moment, the world outside the kitchen vanished. The rain, the darkened house, the expectations of who we were meant to be. It was just us, standing on the edge of something we both knew we shouldn't cross. Instinctively, I reached out and put my hand on his arm. "Alex, you mean a lot to me too. But this is..." My voice faltered as I tried to find the right words. "This is a line we can't cross." He nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and sadness. "I know. I wanted you to know that you're not alone." The words stirred me even more, and I kissed him back, and he kissed me back, and we lost control, and everything spiraled out of control. Our passions came to light, right there. A fragile morning. The storm finally passed, leaving the air heavy and damp. We retreated to our separate rooms, the unspoken tension lingering in the silent house. Sleep came not easily that night. My mind replayed the evening's events over and over, questioning everything I felt, everything I did. Morning brought a fragile sense of normalcy. The sun broke through the clouds and cast a golden light over the lake. When I woke up, Alex was already on the dock, his silhouette framed against the shimmering water. I hesitated before joining him, unsure of how to proceed after the previous night. "Good morning," he said, his tone light but cautious. "Good morning," I replied, sitting down next to him. The air between us was different. We acknowledged the unspoken truths from the night before, but dared not address them. "Please, if you have been in a situation like this, or know someone who has, and if you have any advice, please, I would like to hear it. And if nothing else, let this be a warning. Loneliness can push you to places you would never have thought of. Don't get lost. Like me, don't let your world fall apart before you know what is happening. Because once you cross that line, there is no turning back." Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts. If you found this video helpful, like it and subscribe for more.